It's Rydo, and we're back to another live stream of Shadowverse. Today is Friday, July 9th. We are starting extremely late today. What can I say? I'm still very much having the odd oversleeping phase of insomnia that rarely occurs, but happens every now and then. I guess the good news is we don't have to do any more of the treasure trove event, so we'll just go ahead and open this chest and get a pack, and we'll open this chest and get a pack. For the accountability section, I finished Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice, which ended on a cliffhanger and frankly sucked. Like, it's an awful game. It is probably the best example. If you go back and listen to just like Giant Bomb talk about Hellblade as it was coming out a few weeks before it came out, and the glowing praise that I vaguely recall they had for it and how much of a critical darling it was. And just look at mainstream journalists talking about that game, and then listen to like the Game of the Year talk about that game for that year, and then actually play the game, and you will, I think, fall very much in line with my opinion that it's barely a game. And while it is pretty, the story is tokenistic, as much as they claim in their own feature that it isn't. They've made this kind of boring character in Senua, giving you barely any real backstory, just general concepts. So much so that I beat the game, and it wasn't until I watched the feature after beating the game that it straight out explained to me that this demon voiced character that you hear is your father. They even show you what the demon voice person looks like, but they never show you what the father looks like, so you really wouldn't be able to tell until very much at the end. And maybe that's supposed to be a big reveal, but I mean, I could pretty much spoil all of Hellblade and it won't matter. Like, is this abused woman that has been abused their entire life and has mental problems, has all the mental problems, frankly, hallucinations, audio and visual, hearing voices, probably delusions. It seems like she has a phobia of the dark. There's like just a lot of that, and yeah, I guess that's as much as I want to buy. I could buy one pack, but I might as well just build up my gold. And this offering here might be a better offering. This is an alternate alt versions of, so yeah, this is weird that this is the first expansion, and I think this has done that, where every other expansion has, maybe not, or maybe that's what they mean. Because that says alternate art versions 2. That says alternate art versions 2. Okay, so there's definitely something weird about this expansion in particular, though, where it feels like it is very much taken away or changed old cards and then given you those same cards again, handed them back to you, or actually not handed them to you forced you to open packs to get them again, which just screams utter laziness. Let's see how many we're missing as far as this expansion right now. 2 cards, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Like this card. This might be a new card. This might be an old card, just using the same characters. Which I guess it kind of makes sense that you might want to stick with the characters that you've established. Yeah, I'm only missing like 9 of them. But the problem with that, particularly with Shadowverse, is that you just search for Baphomet. That would be an interesting way to... That'd be an interesting way to verify this. Yeah, for instance, here we have a Baphomet World Reaver card from the Witch expansion. Does it say? Worlds Uprooted. And then you have Baphomet Lord of Aeolion, which is from Steel Rebellion. And I guess they all do something slightly different. And now we have Baphomet Ultimate Creator, which is from Renaissance Chronicles. Yeah, and I guess the danger here is if there were any other Baphomet cards, they're now completely missing from the list. It's very possible there weren't, but it just felt like there was because you have 3 cards of the same characters, whereas if you were to, say, pick a random card here, Angelic Sword Maiden is just a generic name of a generic character. So it would be weird to see this character come back. Plus, this character's art is off model for the other characters' art, like Baphomet. And that is the major problem with Shadowverse, is that if they were going to try to have a consistent art in a consistent world, then they would have had to do that from the beginning, and almost every other card game does go that route. So Shadowverse had some uniqueness in its willingness to have 3, 4, or 5 different varieties of art styles. Just having generic artists do art for the games, and they established the idea that these were all from different universes, much more than even Magic the Gathering in their different planes. Magic the Gathering still, for the most part, has every character look the same unless it's a custom, like, special edition art. And if anything, you would argue that there's more of the anime art style than there is the hard edge fantasy art style, and Baphomet kind of falls more into the hard edge fantasy art style. And yeah, the robot theme in general does not really work, and the ninja theme doesn't really work. I don't know if there's been any real story around that. Yeah, but there's not really a lot to say about Hellblade. I would have to, I don't know, I'd have to see major critical reviews. There is an odd scale certainly on the achievements, in that 13% of the players who played Hellblade on Steam, according to the achievements, did not get past the first section, which would have been 1 perception puzzle, and so we need to runecraft, bloodcraft, swordcraft, portalcraft. you know, they did not get past the first puzzle, perception puzzle, and perhaps the first fight in the game. The fighting in the game is awful. It does at the very end let you fight one like giant beast monster that they call the dragon, and that's it really. It brings back shadow versions of the first two bosses you fight, but then past the first two bosses you fight, there really aren't any more bosses in the game. It is straight up the first two bosses, then a huge gap in the center of the game where you don't fight anything because your sword is broken, which takes up the longest part of the game, and then you fight the dragon, and then the only other things you fight are just the same old like Viking monster, Celtic monster characters over and over again. And in the final fight, they throw a ton of them at you, and you can basically one-hit kill them because they just wanted to make it cinematic. And even at that, they then go the exact opposite direction in the absolute final fight, where they throw a ton at you and just keep on throwing a ton at you until you lose and die. And that is never fun, to have you move the story forward by losing the fight. There are no less than 4 or 5 times you see Senua die, and yet she doesn't die because this whole journey is pretty much just happening in her head. She doesn't really accomplish her goal, and I'm basically just gonna spoil it. Like, her whole quest pretty much is a failure, because her whole quest is pretty much just a fantasy happening in her head. So you end the game on a cliffhanger, and you just don't know who her enemy is. You don't know if her father's really alive or not even. You don't know if she really got the strong magical sword, because it's just such an unreliable narrator of a story anyways. So on one end, the story could continue that she actually killed a god and started Ragnarok. At the other end, the story could be she didn't do any of that, and it just was all in her head. The only thing I can think is that either during the development of Enslaved Odyssey to the West, which took forever and they kind of failed on that game, maybe they swung in the opposite direction, because that game did have a lot more gameplay mechanics, and yet it still didn't sell that well. Or maybe it was the DMC Devil May Cry reboot gave them a lot more funding, and so that game had a lot more polish to it. Although it's questionable whether or not they didn't shop out a lot of it. That's the only excuse I can think, is that they were really, really under the wire, and that's why the game has no gameplay. Because it seems like Team Ninja would have been able to program that, having made DMC a reboot, having made Heavenly Sword. I would have loved if Hellblade was much closer to Heavenly Sword than what it was. Let's see.
What you need is a nice roaring flame.
Okay.
Scatter like the blossom.
Let's see if we can
Still freezing.
do that.
Look at all this kindling.
Um, but yeah, I would much have preferred them just to have remastered and ported Heavenly Sword to PC over making Hellblade. Which, I guess since it's called Hellblade and you get a sword in hell, that probably is the titular Hellblade. So the magic sword you end up with at the end probably does exist in the sequel. Otherwise, you're going to have to strain a comparison and call Suna the Hellblade. Which you could do that certainly, but it wouldn't really satisfy me. But I honestly couldn't be satisfied with the sequel. It'd have to be a completely different game. Yeah, on one end, Hellblade could have been a point-and-click adventure, most closer to the cat lady, and that would have worked, and it would have worked if they hired better writers, and instead of just interviewing a large group of people with mental illness and a lot of people, college professors basically, who discuss mental illness, instead of even, I don't think they really had consultants that actually had and saw patients very much. Yeah. But yeah, had they just written a story instead of making an amalgamation of other people's experiences, it would have been better. It did not make me care for Suna at any point. I just never got a character there. I just got a empty shell in which they put every single disability. And what occurs to me is there's literally no like sexual trauma or at all in the story, which is sad to say, but hugely prevalent in people with disability. They bent over backwards to censor that out. They never once even put a slimy line in of the father, who is obviously crazy and controlling.
Completing termination sequence.
But yeah, the other thing you could have certainly done is make the game, and it probably would have worked better as kind of a Dark Souls game, where there were enemies standing around and Suna had to sneak around them because they were huge and impossible to take on one by one. And so you would then have to stab them in the back with one hit backstabs, or you would have to struggle to fight, much like the
This'll be over quick.
Much like the Dark Souls games, Demon Souls games.
Destroying target. I said be quiet. Completing termination sequence.
Needed to have fused once.
Our eyes close as the curtain falls.
I
loved her. She was everything to me.
What's really crazy in Hellblade is that there definitely is some Tomb Raider reboot envy in it. There's like an animation where she shoulder checks a bridge that's used once, and there's an animation where she crawls on her belly, it's only used once. It's just like wasted effort. I mean, you really can't call it anything other than that. Just completely and totally wasted effort. that people go through to make it a game, or to make it look really pretty, when there's, oops, I guess I only have one of those. Only one Cosmic Angel in this deck. Alright, so I'll have to remember when playing this deck whether or not I have this or not. Which, it kind of makes sense that I'd only have one of these. And that.
What fine threads you have.
And that.
This'll be over quick.
Do I have anything I want to evolve or attack with?
Begin.
We're together forever.
So yeah, like much like my wrap-up episode, in which I watched the entirety of the feature, there's just not really a lot to say as far as Hellblade Suna, because there's just not really a game there. It's not particularly scary. In fact, it feels like it's really off its theme halfway near the end when you're in this more Dante's Inferno hell-like environment, and the rest of the game has been slightly more realistic horror. You see bodies and things, but you don't tend to see like horrific bodies.
Stay away from me.
Interesting. I lucked out there. Didn't realize that was gonna do 1 damage. Ninth turn we can play this. It's fused. Next turn we could do this. The other thing I've been working on is trying to set up a what's called Samba share. Samba's Linux file sharing over a network. Windows 10 seemingly has pretty much just abandoned the concept of file sharing in general. I think they just desperately want you to use the they desperately want you to use their online Microsoft services.
Oh, my beloved Nava.
Because they want you to use those services, they're not really making it easy on you to not use local network service, even though it really serves a different purpose. Like, I'm not gonna try and back up my entire hard drive. There's to like Microsoft One or whatever it's called. That's just too big. If I was gonna do something like that, I would definitely be using like Lumberyard or something like that, where you are paying considerably less for online storage. And see, the Samba, using a program called Folder Sync on Android works perfectly flawless, just like no real problems at all. But something about QoS, which seems to be just the bane and source of all problems, like on my router, seems to slow down network discovery. And I'd spent most of yesterday just trying to figure out, why does this not work on Windows? And so I've updated Windows, and then the active updating Windows that also changed everything and updated drivers, so I had to make some tweaks on my computer
Do you understand now?
today, just to get the audio and everything back to the way it should be. It is a very complicated system with OBS that I have set up now. But yeah, QoS seems to be the thing that that is messing up my Wi-Fi. QoS seems to be the thing that is messing up Samba. So ideally, I would just want to be able to turn off QoS, but I can't, because it is the one thing I need, or would very much like to have a smoother connection, slightly smoother connection. Although maybe in the real world interactions, it's not really even that necessary. The biggest issue certainly would be, I would have a backup start, and then it would start like on a Sunday morning and not be done by Monday morning or afternoon when I started streaming. And then I would just have a major saturation of the backup, like taking out all the bandwidth through the router, even though the bandwidth going through the router is not going out to the internet at that point. It still would be the 1 gigabit per second connection between my computer and the router, moving it to the hard drive that's plugged into the router. Yeah, I wish these things were more or easier. But it is, I guess, as the danger of being cutting edge and experimental, is that that is an issue, certainly. There is also a problem with my router in that it has like 50 megabytes of RAM, and it needs like 4 gigabytes of RAM minimum. I would even 2 gigabytes is probably a little too low, and I imagine most office routers don't have that much RAM, and you really wouldn't need that much RAM if you weren't running modern software like DNS Mask and Samba.
Nothing stops me once I got
But
my
yeah,
speedy boots on.
RAM is an issue, so the only thing I can really do is make a swap file, since there's a hard drive plugged into it, and tell it to use the swap file. But swap files are supposed to be double to 4 times the amount of RAM you have. So if you have 50 megabytes of RAM, you're talking 200 megabytes swap file. That's still way too small. I gave it 4 gigabytes of file, because like on a 5 terabyte file, that's more than enough. It probably will never get even used. But
Hostile life form detected.
I'm not sure
Hostile life form.
if that's going to help that much either. So yeah, I was able to get my cell phone and tablet to back up fairly easily, and not even for an initial full backup, it was not particularly a long process, a day, half a day each. And now I'm just trying to make sure I can consistently get it to work with with Windows.
This'll be over quick.
Of course, I could ignore the Samba and just use an FTP sync program that isn't built into Windows, and schedule that to just use FTP. Neither options on the router are particularly safe or secure, but that's fine. If I really wanted to do this right, I would schedule something like RoboCopy to just copy everything through rsync, or I think RoboCopy is an equivalent to rsync on Windows, and that would work too through an SSH connection with an encrypted key.
Hostile unit confirmed.
This one and this one.
Enemy
Here
identified.
Hold still.
and here.
Completing termination sequence.
And see, have I been working on anything else?
I don't need a gun, not when I have no words.
Well, I have a
Quite talkative.
my air conditioner has been rattling, making the weird rattling sounds.
Justice
And
himself is speaking.
I'm debating back and forth between whether that's because there's something wrong with the air vents in the roof that have gotten hailstormed on and were recently replaced, so maybe they were installed wrong, or whether it is something actually wrong with a relatively only a few years old air conditioner. But yeah, we are in a weird situation with it, certainly, that there is still completely cold air coming out. I can't really do a temperature differential or anything like that to tell if maybe it is a few degrees lower than what it should be, but to my basic normal
Life form detected.
layman feeling, it is very cold air blowing out of the vent. It's just making noise.
See you around, Slick.
So, yep, there's an argument for preventative maintenance, and then there's an argument for ignoring it. Although, I guess
Verifying access.
every time I've ever ignored a car making a rattle, it was the beginning of the end
Emergency mode.
of
Enemy identified.
that car.
Hold still. Hold still.
So that is certainly something I should probably consider.
Goodbye is inevitable. Farewell, Iolani.
Magic of flowers is
Um,
Do you possess the courage?
I guess since we started late,
Could get used to this rain.
there's no reason to drag this on any further. We've been we should cover the video game news and then mostly try and skip a lot of games for Monday, and then
Down.
call it a day. Like,
calling a lizard.
the past couple of weeks are certainly sending me down the path of thinking that maybe, just maybe, I could create a scenario where I'd only stream 2 times a week, but honestly that is
Identified.
just
This
not
world
going
is
to really
filled with
work.
mystery.
Like, I know it wouldn't work. We
Be over quick.
we will get into a bigger
What? No way.
experience. guess if I evolve this and then attack with this, that's fine as attacking with this.
Hold still.
So let's go through the news. Video Game Chronicle says Death Stranding's PS4 owners can upgrade to the Director's Cut for $10. Players will be able to transfer their game saves from PS4 to PS5 too. From what it looks like, the Director's Cut seems to be a streamlining of the shooting experience. More than anything, which the shooting experience was kind of the bad part. It is still very weird to add more content to a game that already had too much content. I feel like the Director's Cut probably does some sneaky things in the background to make sure that that connected world game concept actually can work now that there's going to be considerably fewer people playing it. Let's see. Well,
This will be over quick.
just play one so it dies.
Hold still.
But yeah, I don't think there's a big difference between Death Stranding and Death Stranding Director's Cut enough that you'd want to go back and play it again if you'd played it the first time. Activision is taking action against that new AI auto aim cheat software. They claim to work on any console via machine learning, according to Video Games Chronicle. I said previously that talking about a cheat software making claims probably barely even was news. Now it is slightly more video game news, and that that a video game company is actually taking some action against it, but still barely news.
Listen to your heart and acknowledge
I made some slight tweaks on my WebPeak software. To mostly what I did is removed the bottom part. So now when I move the mouse cursor to about here, you can still see it, but when I move it to about here, you can't. And that's just in case there's a scroll bar on the bottom. I mean, it probably won't matter too much. Like, if I was to, for instance, click on the Sonic Colors video, it's cutting off some of the bottom of this video just because this is zoomed in too much, whereas this page probably should be closer to this, so it would fit on the full screen. Actually, I don't think I like that, so I'm probably gonna remove that as a thing, because yeah, I don't think that really does work in half the scenarios. I'd have to remember to always scroll up to the top. This Video Games Chronicle article, by the way, is just that Sonic Colors Ultimate shows off visual improvements and new game features. I don't think there is... I think Sonic Colors isn't particularly, like, the good one. I think it was Sonic Mania that was the good one, that wasn't actually made by Sega. So, yeah, you could potentially...
100% string and 0% fluff.
Oops, I'm gonna lose here because I'm not paying attention. You could potentially hope that there is more to it, but that there's some slight improvements, but I imagine that there isn't. really any real improvements there.
Shutting down. Howl cyclones, devour the land.
Let's see.
Howl cyclones, devour the land.
Power of mortality.
Yep, I lost. I could have totally won there if I had just been paying a little bit more attention. Let's see, how many more Portal Craft victories do we need? Just one, so we should just stick with this deck because it is a pretty good winner. Video Games Chronicle says Donkey Kong celebrates its 40th anniversary today. 40 years, 1981, July 9th. Donkey Kong and Jumpman, as he originally was called, and Pauline, this is Pauline who shows up in this game and shows up in Mario Odyssey, and that's pretty much it. Although I guess Pauline probably is in some of the Game & Watch versions of Donkey Kong and probably even the NES Donkey Kong games. This side art of Mario certainly shows just how much Mario has changed in his depiction. You put this next to the Mario 64 Mario or the Mario Odyssey Mario, and it just looks like a completely different person. Same is true for Donkey Kong and Pauline. So like all this art is different. And as someone who has a massive Nintendo collection, one of the things I do own is this Donkey Kong arcade machine, which I think they made about 400 or 500 of them. It's in rough shape, real rough shape, and most arcade machines were not designed to last more than a few years, let alone 40. And I haven't powered it on in a very long time. It takes a lot of space, certainly. But yeah, that's one was a very pride. When I got it many years ago, it was still a fairly expensive thing. It was like $500 to get a Donkey Kong arcade cabinet, whereas and since it was going into a home, I certainly didn't have the licenses to charge for our quarters to make any of that money back or anything like that, and any way to handle or maintain that. So yeah, that was recouped. Probably, I would suspect to get one today would be at least $750. And what you're probably paying more than anything is the upkeep, maintenance, and repair to get it in working order. I wouldn't be surprised if I'm way off and it is actually closer to $2,000 or $3,000 for a Donkey Kong arcade cabinet. And it's totally not worth it. Like I would not recommend anybody getting an arcade cabinet unless you're getting a one that's really in good shape and that is very cheap. And frankly, you're going to be willing to put a significant amount of money in it to convert it to a main cabinet or a emulator cabinet that just plays most, if not all, arcade games that existed.
100% string and 0% flop. A spin and a twirl and up. There's our puppy.
Like that would be really what you would want to do, and it's still probably not worth it at that point to get an arcade cabinet. Maybe slightly more worth it to get a cocktail cabinet. But you can get new ones that are built out of newer, possibly even lighter woods and materials. Pre-built, pre-set up, already figured out and already set up. You can get the fake arcades that are 80% of the size of the real arcade machines, and those work fairly well too. They're much cheaper, take a little bit less space, and once you have that starting point of the wood, converting one of those into an emulator box makes a lot more sense. But also you have to ask yourself, the number one goal on this is, are you getting it for yourself, and are you really going to play it? Because you could always just get an arcade fight stick and a Raspberry Pi, and that'll take considerably less space, and just plug it into a much bigger TV. But even then, are you going to actually play it, or are you expecting that kids these days, for instance, are going to want to play it? Because if it's the kids these days concept, you're wrong. You just are. Kids these days are not going to be super interested in arcade machines. They just don't know what it even is.
0% fluff.
Let's see. That is also true with pinball, if not even more so true with pinball.
Spin in a twirl and out.
So
There's our puppy again.
I'll see you in purgatory.
that's why I've never gone down the path of actually considering to own a pinball machine. Plus, pinball takes incredibly more maintenance than an arcade machine, which doesn't have moving parts. But yeah, if I was going to get a pinball machine, I think I almost certainly would just buy a emulating pinball machine with a computer in it and a screen in it, which is not quite the same experience and doesn't really feel like pinball. Yeah, the only people that really, I think, well, even now, like, if you were a Billy Mitchell, Donkey Kong speedrunner type player, I think the rules are very specific now that you have to play in an improved arcade to have, with a judge watching you, to get any high scores. That they won't let you play on a home arcade machine, particularly for Donkey Kong, but I think that's probably true for every arcade cabinet. You could certainly practice at home on an arcade cabinet, and that might be the one reason why you would still own one. But anything on top of that, I think, would be frivolous, because you are still going to have to go to those approved arcades to get a high score, and since you never know what game is going to be your high scoring game, you might as well just always go to those arcades.
Immorality tour begin. Check out my fancy footwork.
Yeah, I don't know if there's really a lot more relevancy to Donkey Kong, other than Donkey Kong was the first game released in America, for Nintendo of America, or at least under the title of Nintendo. They may very well have been a third-party assistant to something that has never been revealed. I don't think they were. And then between 1981 and 1983, Nintendo had major success because Donkey Kong, and then I believe the Popeye games, which a lot of Donkey Kong cabinets were converted into Popeye arcade cabinets, made massive amounts of success because the graphics for Donkey Kong were As much as it's hard to believe, way better than most of the other arcade machines out at that time. And that gave them enough success to push them down further. Now we're at Runecraft and Bloodcraft. Pushed them to try and release the NES after the... I think this is Runecraft. After the failure of the first generation of video game consoles. And the launch of the NES and the success of the NES allowed Nintendo to become a major player in video game consoles and stay as a major player even today. In fact, Nintendo is the only major player that has been in the business this long. You could argue Sega is probably the second longest lasting player, but Sega stopped making consoles long times ago. Microsoft was extremely late to the party. Sony was fairly late to the party. There's probably some like Capcom and Konami companies, which if you went deep into the history of companies like Capcom and Konami, probably did have some LCD screen games like Game & Watch games that came out, which might technically make them as prevalent or as long lasting as Nintendo. You would think... Actually, I've never seen this cocktail version of Donkey Kong. Basically looks like a school desk. And this is kind of the more Japanese style, I think. Smaller cabinet style arcade machines. I don't think they made any of those really in Japan. You can see this is all in Japanese, so this would be a flyer for the Japanese audience, where arcades were a big deal. Although now, I think arcades are pretty much dead in Japan because of the pandemic and pachinko games taking all the oxygen out of the room for things like that.
Nothing stops me once I got my speedy boots on.
Okay. Part of the problem with the idea of a cocktail version of Donkey Kong is that it would just be alternating and flipping the screen between one player and the other player on both sides in a two-player game, and there really isn't a two-player at the same time synchronous gameplay mechanic as far as Donkey Kong.
Power is what you make of it.
Let's move on. Yeah, it is strange though that Nintendo wouldn't have an announcement or something ready to go for this event. They knew that was happening. Nintendo seems to be particularly bad these days at actually at having an experience ready to go or having an announcement ready to go. Moving on, according to Video Games Chronicle, Death Stranding could be the first PS5 game with ultra-wide video support. Kojima projection claims the feature will be included in the director's cut.
Son of a gun, ain't ya?
That's interesting.
Shutting down.
So that's 2,560 pixels by 1080, or 3,440 pixels by 1440 resolutions. I think ultra wide is probably a weird middle step, though, because you might as well want to go to 2K or 4K instead. And while Death Stranding does have big scenic shots, and so a little bit more width might feel cinematic, it's I don't think particularly likely to strike the fancy of a lot of people over the idea of having, say, but do this.
A glimpse into the future is only the beginning.
I couldn't do
Monsters
this.
come in every shade imaginable.
The ordained hour has arrived.
My crystal sword. I am
There
beyond
we go.
prophecy.
Take it from here.
Yeah, I just can't imagine that a lot of people really are going to want to add more strain to a probably already strained visuals of Death Stranding on the PS5.
So this is my
It does just feel like that's pushing it to its limits, which, yeah, I don't know if you really need to push a game to its limit. Well, if I put that here,
So sweet, you'll get cavities.
and then we evolve that to attack that. We won't kill it anyways. It's just end the turn. According to Video Games Chronicle, Xbox is still planning to drop Xbox Live Gold. It's claimed. Someone is claiming this, according to Video Games Chronicle. So claim on top of claim.
Power is what you make of it.
Which at a certain level, that's every news site. Every single news thing is a claim. Microsoft is said to be waiting until Game Pass reaches a milestone of subscribers. I don't know why anybody wouldn't think that that's the idea. And inherently, all this really goes to show that we've really never had a major consumer pushback revolt in video games, or kind of anywhere, where a company actually takes that message on and then changes their plans. They just try to boil the frog and slowly make the changes, but eventually they always get their way. It's only slightly inaccurate to say that the always on DRM effectively is getting implemented on the Xbox, because significant portions of the games are online or have online components, and while you may not have to always be online, you almost certainly have to be online at least once every few months to renew the keys and make sure that you can still play the games you've purchased. Yeah, and I can't think of a single company that's actually said we're not doing that, and then they really haven't done that, even if it was years later. In fact, you can pretty much be accurate just by making baseless claims of nefariousness on any company. I can today make the baseless claim that at some point in the future, YouTube is going to just kick out every single user that has less than 1,000 subscribers and delete all their videos. Like, I can make that baseless claim, and given an infinite timeline, you can pretty much guarantee it's the case. Maybe that happens when YouTube is no longer relevant and there's an easy way to just transition all of your videos to some other services. That would be the ideal end move there. Or it could just happen tomorrow, giving no one enough time to move over their files, depending on how many videos you have.
Wind, grant them courage. The path ends here.
The only slight safety that YouTubers have is that if YouTube tried to delete a bunch of people's videos to make up room, they would probably immediately get sued and then legally be required to hold all the videos for a certain amount of time anyways as evidence, which they're already to some extent legally required to hold the videos anyways, and it probably wouldn't be worth their time to free up hard drive space on old hard drives that have been written and read to a lot anyways. So I imagine they could start to move single copies of videos that have like less than 2 or 3 views onto 2 or 3 servers and then delete them from the majority of their backend servers. And then if you go to watch a video that is very much underviewed, it's just really slow to pull up that video compared to a video that has like 1 million views. And I wouldn't be surprised if YouTube tries to straight up have completely different services like YouTube Music that eventually become way faster, and YouTube itself just becomes incredibly slow. It would also make a lot more sense for YouTube to straight up just say no new people and keep the old people than it is to say get rid of the old people and do the effort of the sorting that they might have to do. Moving on from baseless claims, Gamma Sutra has an article. Tencent has rolled out a facial recognition tech to enforce late night gaming curfews in China. So basically they are basically going to have cameras on every single computer, and wouldn't the Chinese government, or let's just be fair, any government, just love to have every computer looking at everybody and looking inside everyone's house at all times? They would absolutely love that. Okay, do we want to evolve anything? Not sure if this is a good idea, but we'll do this.
Let's revel in the fun together. Thanks for the soul.
Let's see. Gamma Sutra has an article here. SciPlay Corporation has acquired the Finnish mobile studio Koei. Koei? I guess that's how you pronounce that? Koei? Or Koei? Let's see. Yeah, these are fairly small companies though. I don't recognize them.
Calm the heck down!
The 11th annual BAFTA Young Game Designers Competition announced some winners. 51 finalists across the 10 to 14 and 14 to 18 categories. Let's see. Habibullah Butt took home Game Concept Award for their work on Rewind. That is, I don't know if that's one person or if that's a group of people. A 3D landscaping game designed to help people understand the stages of grief. Andrew Alwing was handed the Game Maker Award for creating Getting Out of It, a 2D title that asks players to escape a claustrophobic underground world using only a jetpack and a rope. I feel like all these names may have been made up names to protect the identity, since this is British BAFTA Awards.
Your mincemeat!
A flash of metal, a silent night.
Crazy, crazy! Yeah, I
Thanks
love
for
this
the
job.
soul.
You're
There we
merciful.
go. In the 15 to 18 years category, Harry Rimmer was honored with the Game Concept Award for dreaming up the time travel whodunit Wish You Were Here. And finally, Sarah Sazaz nabbed the Game Maker Award for the project Thoughtless, which sees players take the role of a detective searching for their lost uncle. Which, I played that game, a story about my uncle, where it was a character looking for his uncle and didn't even make it to the end. Just because the gameplay is. All 4 winners would be given the opportunity to build on initial ideas through a mentorship scheme, and they will also receive other prizes including access to workshops, masterclasses, networking opportunities, and games, which isn't that too bad, but frankly certainly seems like an award system like this should give them a freaking computer minimum. Because that would be the thing, certainly, that could help them more than anything else. Is here's a $2,000, $3,000 gaming computer that loaded up with software. Certainly, also you could. Like, you could easily, being BAFTA, you could easily get free licenses for life for like Unity, Unreal, Game Maker, Dreams, things like that. These names feel really weird, though. Like, not a single one of those. But like here, even the names of the people that did the virtual juries: Dr. Joe Twist, OBE, Jody Azhar, Claire Bosseri, and Des Gale. Like, those are all some fairly weird sounding names. Okay. Let's see how this goes.
Please, no more.
Corpses.
I know the UK is a very diverse environment, but that does just seem like an odd
Does this outfit make me look too
choice. If we look on here, apparently this has been going as far back as 2016. Then you can look at, I guess, each of the games. and actually download them. Interesting. Yeah, and for little kids developers, I will say these do look like actual efforts compared to the low effort garbage that we often see on Steam that is way, way worse. Let's see, hit that, I guess.
Your head and body must part ways.
Where should I drop this? Oops, my hand slipped.
There we go. Honestly, this awards should certainly should have been talked about more. I would say, like there really is no good reason that this wasn't shown off. We have here a huge amount of finalists, whereas if I was to go back this way, the page is not even found. So page is not even found. The website sucks though. This BAFTA, like they're not even going to an HTTPS. Yep, just the entire website is just not found on HTTPS servers. Ridiculous. So I would say there's definitely some promotion issues. They have everything back to 2018, but they don't have 2017 or 2016 listed.
Truth is waste. Learn what is needed.
That was possibly the wrong card to play. But yeah, they have some advertisement issues certainly there, and they have some they have some website issues there that they need to work on. I don't know if there's a better organization than BAFTA to give out awards like that too. Certainly the ESRB should have some kind of event like that. The ESRB could easily do that and give out awards to young game developers without really picking and winning and choosing winners or losers around like major game publishers. The video game awards and those shows that happen in America and in the West, those could, oh man, I lost a rank. Those could easily have young game award versions, and that would be very feel good. Honestly, that would also work very nicely right past E3, when there's not likely to be any big announcements of AAA games or anything like that. Or you could do it right before E3, even when there's not that high of a chance of AAA game announcements, as a build-up to E3. Moving on, Gamasutra says Genvid Technologies hiring a senior UX designer for California, Washington, or New York. Kometsu says Kimco and Water Phoenix have officially announced a apocalyptic virtual world visual novel called Archetype Arcadia for PS4, PS5, and Switch throughout October 21st in Japan. Is this guy stabbing this guy in the chest or punching him, or I don't even know. It's like image on top of image on top of image. They seem to be holding these VR glasses, so I think the idea is that yeah, apocalyptic virtual world. I adjusted the framing so it shows the bottom now, so now when the mouse cursor is at the bottom of the screen, it shows all the way to the bottom of the screen whether there's a scroll bar or not. One thing I was noticing was that there's occasionally a white line at the top of the screen peak. Let's jump through this and look at what this is. Looks like a visual novel. Looks kind of moe. Doesn't really seem to give much of an indication how the story is really gonna go. Yeah, I don't know. It would be weird to be like forced into a virtual world and then the apocalypse was happening in that virtual world. And people were trapped or stuck in that apocalypse. Yeah, and the white line was showing up because of my anti-abuse of the content ID system of moving the image slightly in random directions or cyclic directions, moving the pixels left and right and up and down in a cycle. And because it does that, the only thing I could do is potentially frame one pixel out of each side, which probably wouldn't hurt too much to do that. So I might go with that, I might not. It kind of just matters if it matters, and doesn't matter if it doesn't matter. If nobody's complaining about it, nobody's seeing it. They updated the YouTube Studio app for content creators. Although it seems like really all they did was put a new slap of paint over it and change the icon arbitrarily.
Let us play together.
But it did get me to go back into it and look at it, and
We're ready to
yeah, I've done better in the past couple of months, or the past month, than I thought I had been doing, which is nice. But
come in every shade imaginable.
I don't think I've had any major like successes. Not on the lines of like when there was a big Hearthstone expansion and I would get lucky there and have major 500 views plus on specific videos. But then a lot of those videos certainly didn't lead to more subscribers.
Pulse will sink, but the true will rise.
Moving on, Gemetsu has an article here. Genshin Impact version 2.0 update special program has been announced for 5 a.m. Or 8 a.m. UTC 4. So either it has happened or is... I guess it has happened. Hifu Fragment for Steam launches July 17th, a Toho Project visual novel. Once again, Toho Project still not making a lot of sense to me as to what it really is. Suppose we could look at it on Steam. English is not supported, Japanese and Chinese only, so kind of doesn't matter what it is. But one of these days I will figure out what Toho projects really mean, if they mean anything more than this is a game that involves
The ordained hour
certain
has
kinds of characters. Let's see. My next life as a villainess, all routes leading to doom, pirates that stir the waters, has been confirmed for the Switch. This is a game adaptation of the light novel and anime series. The story basically is that this lady, this girl, has played a visual novel and knows that this character that she has woken up into, so she gets isekai to another world and inside her video game, but instead of being put in the body of the protagonists and the good guy, she's in the body of the villainess. So she has to desperately try and figure out how to change the events and the different routes in the branching path game that she now lives in, so that she doesn't end up as the villainess, as the person that eventually gets a terrible bad ending to her
so
life.
Sweet,
Or
you'll get cavities.
which, it's on the face of it an interesting concept of a story. Like, I know that if I if I get on the path or get pushed onto the path of acting as the bad guy, I know where this path leads. I know that I'm going to end up in a bad place. And thus it's an effort, perhaps even a feeble effort, into doing good for your own sake, which is selfish, and thus many would argue doesn't count to actually doing good. It's the philosophical thought: if you're only doing good to get in heaven, then actually you're just being selfish, therefore you don't deserve to get in heaven, which creates a catch-22. But it also, that concept creates a easy way to excuse any person claiming somebody's getting into heaven or not, or dismiss any actions that are outwardly, objectively good. And the opposite argument certainly is also true. If you're only doing good things to avoid getting in hell, then you're being selfish and you don't deserve to get in heaven. But inherently, the demonization of humans being selfish creates a easy excuse to dismiss anyone's action and not appreciate anyone's actions. Whereas I would argue the more logical realization one must make is humans are inherently selfish. They have thousands, if not millions, no, I don't think millions, but thousands of years of DNA in them, programming them, making their bodies and their brains work to be selfish. It is inherent in every time we eat, every time we breathe, every time we drink, that we are acting to preserve ourselves and enrich ourselves. And that is at the core what selfishness is. We are acting to increase our odds of procreating, decrease the odds of other people procreating, increase decrease the amount of work we have to exert to get calories. To and so you can't realistically say that humans shouldn't be selfish, in my opinion. Humans should try to be generous, but like there is a level of selfishness that is the human species, the human condition, and it should be there. It is our nature. It is the nature of all animals. You can go too far with it, like the panda bears, and be so obsessed with eating food that you're not willing to breed. You can go too far with it, certainly with Jeff Bezos and the billionaires with more money than they could possibly ever spend in 5 lifetimes. But it is necessary for survival that there's a level of selfishness, and that should not be used as a catch-all excuse to dismiss when someone decides to do something good for someone else, even if really they're just thinking on broader terms. Because if I feed my starving neighbor, I enrich all of society, and then by enriching all of society, I am enriching myself. That is still selfishness, if you want to describe it that way. Like, and it gets down to living your life like a Buddhist monk, and even the Buddhist monks are frankly a little bit selfish.
Of course I do.
Because while they claim to be trying to not be selfish, they are consistently propagating a scheme in which they are being fed for free so they don't starve to death by people who want to gain good karma. Which, if the Buddhist monks simply had not become monks in the first place, they would not create the need to then live off the charity of others.
I'm already a proper lady,
Meanwhile, the Buddhist monks are not usually doing a lot to enrich society back, other than the claim of increasing karma and spiritual well-being. This is also true in almost every religion, is that almost every preacher or authority in a religion is doing very little actually to contribute to society, other than the claim of spiritual enrichment, and yet they often live fairly high on the hog for someone who is effectively a beggar. But I don't want to get into a rant as far as religions, but yeah, that is something you should certainly keep an eye out. Moving on, Gemetsu says Access Games showcase all access set for August 16th, featuring new games, previous announcements, and special guests. So another announcement event. Yokai Watch 1 for iOS and Android launches July 10th in Japan. So they're going to port the first game to mobile, which I could see this being a point where if this works fairly well, that it gets an English translation and just gets kind of loosely launched on a worldwide. Certainly then the idea of a Pokemon clone being played on a cell phone might certainly give a level of concern to Nintendo, who has failed to really get Pokemon games, or real Pokemon games, onto the cell phones, or Nintendo games in general onto cell phones. apparently, according to GameFly, a game called Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl is coming out 10/5/21. That'd be October 5th for PS4, Xbox One, and Switch.
The world calls,
That would be
and I answer.
interesting if
Prove myself.
like a Smash Brothers clone came out with Nintendo characters. I mean Nickelodeon characters. That being said, is it new Nickelodeon characters that people don't recognize mixed in with old Nickelodeon characters that young kids wouldn't recognize? Because that's about the only way that I think you get enough characters in that case. Unless you're going to just deep dive into like Bin 10 universes or something like that, and every single character from specific shows, whether you recognize them or not, ends up being
The uncharted desert awaits.
being included. I'm not sure if there's really enough game there, even at that. Like we have to really admit that the Smash Brothers universe is just so ahead of the curve, and it has been so successful in bringing in non-Nintendo characters at this point that there's just really only enough room for one Smash Brothers game, and that's Smash Brothers and nothing else.
The uncharted desert awaits.
If Microsoft was going to try and do a Smash Brothers game with every single like game that is on the Microsoft platform that they can get every character from every game, it still wouldn't be as interesting as Smash Brothers, and same is true for Sony. Let's see, I guess we do this.
What do we have here?
That.
What do we have here?
That. Gamatsu has an article. Nexomon is coming to the PS5, Xbox Series, PS4, Xbox One, and Switch. This is apparently something that was already on PC and is now coming to consoles. It's currently on Steam, so we can look at it a little bit better. Catch and collect over 300 unique Nexomon. Here we can see it's rated very positively. It is, by every look of it, a Pokemon clone game in every way. It doesn't look bad. It's on my wish list for $9.99. It's single player, English full audio. The one thing here is 300 is enough, certainly, but you would kind of like a DLC or sequel game to throw in a few more if you can. The art style seems like it is slightly off in it's a little weird looking, but honestly, even if I was to look at a modern Pokemon game, I'd probably find half of the characters, both the human characters and the Pokemon characters, to be fairly odd looking.
Smell looks so sweet, you'll get cavities.
I suspect that is just
The ordained
the way
hour has arrived.
things are would
I'm
go.
ready for more. What do we have here?
I wish there was a list here above wish list, because honestly, I would like to have played and owned this and played this. I certainly think there's a decent chance to push people to play Nexomon on Steam for $10 or $4.99 if you got it on sale, which it's been that price 7 times. So that is way cheaper than buying a Pokemon game. It doesn't get you into this giant Pokemon universe where somebody gets a kid gets obsessed with Pokemon and then they're playing Pokemon card games. Let's see.
Lightning storm.
Sweet enough for you?
Let's see. Gamatsu has Genshin Impact version 2.0 update, the Immovable God, and the Eternal Euthymia?
It won't be long now.
Euthymia? I don't know that word. Euthymia. I guess it would be euthymia. Never heard of it. Like, not even anything close to that pronunciation. Genshin Impact certainly still doing well for a game that still has that gacha element. Although at this point I think they might very well have done well to drop the gacha element and just have a full game, or have an option where you can get rid of the gacha elements and pay more to remove the gacha, remove the ads.
Spell looks so sweet, you'll get cavities.
Oinky, oinky.
Honey glazed.
Blessed is the promised day.
Here comes the sugar rush. Sweet enough for you?
Here we go.
I'm shocked.
WitcherCon, if you really call it WitcherCon, it seems like it was really just a stream, or a collection of streams
Just going shopping.
happened. Let's see what is important to mention. Season 2 of the Netflix series happened. The Witcher Beyond video game, Beyond video games doesn't really mean anything. Seems like it's really just 5 conversations that happened across 2 streams. At least that's what labeled. From what I recall, was actually shown is basically they're doing some skin elements to The Witcher 3, like director's cut, which apparently is coming out, to make the characters look more like the Witcher in the Netflix series, and that's kind of it. That was pretty much the only thing I'd seen. It, if anything, shows that whatever conflict was occurring seems to have been wrapped up at this point, because the writer of the Witcher books is working with Netflix, which is working with CD Projekt Red, so it seems like everybody has gotten on the same page now, and everyone, at least outwardly, seems happy, or happy enough.
Sword deserves a pointed response.
You dumb beast.
Uh,
I'll burn you
Way
alive.
Forward announced this game, Ruby Arrowfell, launching for the PS5, Xbox Series, PS4, Xbox One, Switch, and PC in 2020. It's a side-scrolling 2D adventure game featuring the characters from Ruby, which I don't know if anybody really cares about Ruby or Rooster Teeth. Rooster Teeth does a lot of things, certainly, but that doesn't inherently mean that the fandom is still there, or ever really was there. Like, it's very easy on the internet to get in the middle of a fandom and make it seem like there's millions, tens, hundred thousands of fans, but if you told me that the peak fandom of Ruby was 80,000, I'd believe you. If you told me it was 10,000, I'd believe you. If you told me it was 3,000, I'd believe you. There's definitely a flaw in the visuals here, as far as it's a 2D side-scrolling appearance. So you'll probably get some decent cutscenes. And it's interesting, Arc System Works and WayForward are working together. But the actual game seems like it's going to be a fairly generic looking platformer, which is
Mankind's tenacity will
in line with WayForward's gameplay style, and WayForward is known for making their platformers look better than the average platformer,
uncharted desert awaits.
and they tend to play alright, so I suspect this game might work well, although I'm still uncertain whether there's enough relevancy to cover any of the Ruby games. It is very possible that it is more important to cover like the Little Witch Academia games instead.
I'm not afraid of the light.
Yogemetsu has that information. Witcher 3 Wild Hunt Complete Edition for next gen has updated box art and the free Netflix and show inspired DLC. Here on the box art you can see it still looks like the Geralt of Rivia of the video game though. Will include a range of visual and technical improvements, including ray tracing, faster loading times. This would be great. PC will be able to upgrade for free, so if I could get Witcher 3 on my Steam account instead of the free copy I got from Good Old Games when I bought a video card, that would be great because I never played the Blood and Wine DLC, and that would give me a great excuse to see if I can move the save file over to the Steam version, which shouldn't really be a problem, and then play the Blood and Wine DLC with the better graphics.
I have to stop standing in peace.
Gamma Sutra has an article here, the relaxing open world puzzle design of a monster's expedition. We may have talked about this before. Looks like a Sokoban style game. There was one Steven's sausage roll that this looks a lot like too, except for the problem with Steven's sausage roll is that it was always too expensive. It's just like never gone on discount. He wants like $25 for a game that you could not convince anybody to pay more than $10 for. A game called Blue Fire for PS4 launches July 23rd. It's apparently on Steam already. Got a trailer here. Looks like a 3D platformer. Doesn't look particularly bad. Let's see. Yeah. On Steam here, we have it as mostly positive, $19.99. This came out February of 2021. That meets all the requirements. That can be moved over to the wish list. A game called Crown Trick is coming to the PS4 and Xbox One. It's a turn-based roguelike game currently on Switch and PC.
The uncharted desert awaits.
So let's check it out on Steam too.
Did you send this breeze?
See what kind of game this is. This whole trailer seems to be mostly a cutscene, not actual gameplay. It's rated very positively. It's already on my wish list. And if the images want to load, that would be nice. And this is why I need QoS. Although QoS doesn't even seem to really work in this case, as far as Steam is concerned.
Pain and suffering are what I live
Check out my fancy
for.
footwork. Get ready to fly.
Best of luck to you.
So yeah, here it is, now loaded. Yep. Turn-based
Peak is on the
combat RPG game. kind of dungeon crawler. Yeah, I could see trying something like that.
You dare defy me in my
Although,
Like the
at
moon
a certain
on the
point,
water's surface.
it is dangerously close to something like Disgaea, where it is a slow strategy placement game, which that's not really what I would want. There is kind of this fine line between having like 5 or 6 enemies all on a platform and it being such an incredibly slow experience, because there's 5 or 6 enemies and then you have 5 or 6 protagonists fighting with you, or way more than 5 or 6, like 20 enemies versus 20 protagonists, and that makes every single fight incredibly long and incredibly boring. Don't feel like Crown Trick is going down that route, but I do want to certainly be careful. We don't have to play any private games today, so I can just struggle throughout this entire stream to try and get victories. And that's pretty much what I plan on doing. Gamma Sutra has an article. Ubisoft is worried inappropriate behavior could hurt staff hiring.
And I answer.
Ubisoft has indicated that the occurrence of inappropriate behavior by employees has been a real risk to the company. What's funny here, though, is what they are talking about, what Ubisoft is talking about, may very much have nothing to do with what Gamma Sutra is talking about. The inappropriate workplace business, and see, this is probably just a French requirement that you list your risks, where that often is not the case. Toxicity in games and services. Where is it? Inability to attract and retain talent is high. Occurrence of inappropriate behavior by employees is moderate. Like, what Ubisoft very well is talking about in this forum may very well be that the IT company refused to do their job and then don't want to get back into that whole story, but that's the inappropriate behavior they could be talking about. Or it could be Ubisoft is saying that a lot of the cancel culture embracing staff that work at Ubisoft are being inappropriate or have inappropriate workplace behavior, which at a certain point it's true. Yeah, if you're going to work every day and you're there to change the work culture instead of do your job, then that's not in the minds of your employer appropriate behavior. The appropriate behavior of the employer is to sit down, shut up, and do your job, and not cause problems. And very much so, that is where unions definitely refuse to do that.
What do we have here?
And unions help, and yet there's this strong, seemingly worldwide anti-union sentiment amongst game developers and associate level game developers in particular.
There is no retreat.
And in all fairness, I think Ubisoft's management would label talks of forming a union as inappropriate behavior too.
What do we have here?
So this is one of those stories that I think is really taking some form somebody filled out without really even giving it two thoughts. And they are using that as an excuse to push propaganda, which Gamma Sutra has been doing for a very long time now. It's been 4 or 5 months where they've pushed this idea that Ubisoft is a particularly toxic employee workplace, with there being very little coming out to prove that. They're kind of grasping at straws, and they are trying to cancel Ubisoft. Whereas, once again, if you want to cancel Ubisoft, this Assassin's Creed Unity game that was just announced, like, there's a high chance that that's going to be a microtransaction, games as service laden mess of a game, just trying to suck every single dime out of players. There's plenty to complain about Ubisoft as far as the products they delivered, as far as Odyssey and Origin, in that there was a lot of live action services and DLC there in a series that had traditionally been a single player, one and done purchase product. Three to a random follower.
Things I do for fashion.
I have been waiting for you.
Moving on, Gamma Sutra has an article. Roblox partners with Sony Music to fill the metaverse with musicians. So, Sony Music Entertainment, not really that connected to Sony Interactive Entertainment. I suppose Sony as a parent company still probably owns both divisions. But, yeah. Sony Music. I don't know if I can even really claim they're one of the worst as far as video game content IDs. I think Warner Brothers by far has affected me a lot more than Sony ever has.
Have a sip.
Golly, it's chilly here.
So I don't think I have too much to say negative about Sony Music as a YouTube content creator. I could almost certainly make a claim that they're probably not paying their talent very well or treating their talent very well. That's probably true for almost any music company.
The path ends here.
The only reason I'm playing ranked right now is because of the treasure chests. But you want to try and get those. Otherwise I would not really be playing ranked. Let's see. Video Games Chronicle says Dark Souls 3 now supports Xbox Series X and S frames per second boost. Nothing more needs to be mentioned there. A new PlayStation 5 update improves system performance. Will be rolling out for all users. There is a Windows update for an active exploit that everybody should probably install. It's called Print Nightmare. You really don't need to know anything more than just go to Windows Update and run a Windows Update, maybe run a virus scan. Windows Game Chronicles says Suda and Swery are still trying to make a horror game happen. The No More Heroes and Deadly Premonition creators announced Hotel Barcelona in 2019. Of course, both of them have since worked on at least one game, although I think Suda has actually worked on 2 games. So it may very well just be a case of them getting together and certainly getting the funding. There is, I think, a slight danger that you could claim. Like that there's just a risk of having Suda and Swery on the same team, that you would have somebody with crazy ideas and different crazy ideas, and they would clash, or they would just go over budget immediately. And you really shouldn't have 2 auteur artists, if that's the right word to use, in a group. Here we have a quote here. I contact Swery at least once every 2 to 3 months, even during the COVID, about how to make Hotel Barcelona happen. Suda replied, "It really depends on the timing since it gets heavily influenced on the work I'm doing at that period." So yeah, it's not crazy for artists to have ideas like in the back of their mind for months or years before they actually get around to it. I don't know if this is actual video game news, but Video Game Chronicle is reminding you Netflix's Resident Evil Infinite Darkness series is now available to watch. I guess I'll watch it. Barely have enough time to watch anything. Barely have enough time to actually play video games. I desperately now need to think about whether I have enough footage for October, and then if I do, I want to move on to the next, a really good game. Now I am noticing, I have taken special notice that there are people actually enjoying Danganronpa. So yeah, I think I probably will want to finish the Nonary game and then get back to Danganronpa a little bit faster. Like if I see somebody enjoying something, all the more reason to get back to it and finish it. Even though I frankly would like to have 6 months of not doing a visual novel. But we may make a special decision there to go through all the Danganronpa games, since it seems popular enough. Whereas a lot of my series don't get any views, and a lot of the videos that are the top viewed videos are still like Lego Batman games I covered years ago, which I guess I should do a Lego game too. Video Games Chronicle has an article here. Death Stranding Director's Cut's trailer reveals a September release date. So September 24th. Let's see, we had already talked about Tencent rolling out facial recognition. I don't know why this Gamma Sutra article is not loading. It's taking its sweet time to load. 36 states have taken legal aim at Google, arguing its Play Store practices violate antitrust laws. Google, however, argues the lawsuit is meritless, which would be your basic response. I think we'll probably get better reporting on these lawsuits later, if there is anything really to report upon. I wouldn't be surprised if this is just an attempt to attack Google, because those 39 states are heavily Republican states, and they're upset about Google censoring, for lack of a better term, the former president Donald Trump, which he is also trying to go forward, announced a lawsuit against Twitter and Google and everybody else that worked together, colluded to kick him off basically at the same time. Although it's hard to call it collusion when everybody has a valid excuse to do the same thing at the same time.
We won't give him an inch.
Where's my post? We're ready to sail?
Moving on, Gamatsu has an article here. Microids is going to publish physical editions of Forever Entertainment's Panzer Dragoon and the House of the Dead games. Don't have any art for it, so that's a fairly boring article just to have text for announcements of games. Gamatsu says Crayon Shinchan Ora to Hakase no Natsuyasumi Owaranai Nano Ka no Taibai second trailer is out. The game is coming out July 15th for the Switch. I guess I'll leave it to you to look at this trailer if you're interested. There's kind of a high chance that this game is not making its way to the West. I just don't think they think there would be enough audience there, and in this case, they may very well be right that there isn't enough of an audience there. I should have played that in the opposite direction, but whatever. So
Justice
hit
finds
this,
a way.
Time to retreat.
hit that, and hit that. Let's see. Kimetsu has Bright Memory Infinite Game Charging Night trailer. I'm not sure I really want to see yet another trailer for Bright Memory Infinite. In a lot of ways, Bright Memory Infinite dangerously looks a lot like Hellblade Senua's Sacrifice. The only difference there is that we saw the original Bright Memory that kind of became a demo, and we know that there's actual gameplay in Bright Memory, so
Past is my only salvation.
That seems like we definitely have a chance of this being an actual game. But then there is also a chance that it's just been all flash and substance, and there's just stealth now, and then on top of fast-paced shooting and hack and slashing. Let's see. So apparently you should buy Bright Memory right now because you'll get a free upgrade to Bright Memory Infinite. For free. So if you came over here on the wish list, Bright Memory is on my wish list. It's discounted for $7.99. It's been as low as $3.49. I think that it's kind of a one-time, one-off deal though, and that was probably before there was any announcement of this being anything more.
Lightning storm.
Justice finds a way.
Wow.
So yeah, I would definitely suggest anybody interested in Bright Memory Infinite to make an effort to get Bright Memory, which once again I'm at this point making a special list of things that I want to buy that are not showing up during summer sales and catching my attention through the process in which I am searching for games during the summer sales and other sales. And that is creating a disconnect, certainly. And while I do have plenty of games, I will say I'm still very much in a situation where it's hard to remember or get hyped about playing games. Although, in all fairness, I was hyped about playing Hellblade, and then I play it, and then I'm just dissatisfied severely. Let's see. Kimetsu has the Famitsu sales, I believe, have been updated. No new release in the top 10 at all. All old games this for the week of July 9th. Or for the week of the 21st. Nope. What week is it? July 4th. 28th. June 28th through July 4th. Lots of numbers on the screen. And then hardware sales. Still going large. Okay. Seriously cannot attack anything other than that, can I?
Blessed is the promised day.
I always catch the varmint. Eventually. Rapid fire!
So I'm just hoping that would have killed those, but it didn't.
Foul forces of darkness, bow before my tempest.
See, there's some more news on Gametsu about Neo, the world ends with you. More characters, more details. They're still teasing out information about the characters.
Son of a gun, ain't ya?
Still putting out very large images. Also, like whatever resolution they decided to use for their press packet was not the right resolution. Like they're handing out images that look like they would only make sense if they were on the side of a digital billboard on a building. Let's see. Surgeon Simulator All Access, all areas coming to Xbox Series, Xbox One, Steam, and Microsoft Store on September 2nd. Right now it's only on the Epic Games Store. I'm still not really sure if Surgeon Simulator 2, though, is kind of on the same level as Surgeon Simulator 1, or if it's kind of taken it in a slightly different direction. Maybe a better direction, but different nonetheless.
Dear wind.
Let's see. Let's see. The Idolmaster Starlight Season details Stage for You mode, and the PS4 demo has been announced. PC specifications have also been announced. So more details coming out for this Idolmaster game, which may not be ported to English. I'd have a hard time really thinking about covering an Idolmaster dance game. See, this is just a long presentation, this video, and this video is just straight up a music video. Either one of those, I think, really explains what the game is, or the gameplay elements, which I think are fairly minimal.
We'll return light to the canal. At your service.
Gametsu has Hot Wheels Unleashed Track Builder trailer and gameplay trailer, which, yeah, I think I'm sufficiently hyped enough as far as a Hot Wheels game. It'll just come down to whether or not it's reviewed well, so I'm not going to watch that. Moss Book 2 has been announced for PlayStation VR, which, since I don't have VR, unfortunately, I can't play Moss 1, and thus can't play Moss 2. It's surprising that Moss didn't eventually get converted to a non-VR version, but I think it may very well just be so built around the concept of VR that it just can't easily be converted. What it should do if they ever have any idea of getting away from being VR, is closer to the release of book 2, announced that book 1 is now out of VR exclusivity, as it were, and they've made a non-VR version. Of course, I could be totally wrong here, and there actually is a way to play it without VR now, and I've just not been paying enough attention to it, which is totally believable. There is still also like 2 or 3 other play as a mouse style games that came out around the same time as Moss did, and there is one that is in development based on a fairly popular book series. I think it was called Redfall or Redwall book series. I think Redwall. Let's see. Gametsu has an article here. I-L-L. Bad font choice here. I, then an L slightly taller than the L's. Ilphonic announces a co-op multiplayer shooter called Arcadegeddon for PS5 and PC. Excuse me. Let's see what. Yeah, Ilphonic, much better written style is that way. Yeah, it looks like an Overwatch game with a more cartoony Fortnite visual appeal to it. You may have noticed, and maybe this is a pandemic more than anything, but we have finally broken that series of Fortnite clones and Fortnite style games and just games that are becoming massively popular for a couple of weeks, and then kids are moving on to a new game. Like, the fad games seem to have stopped. Is that because better games are now out? Is that because a generation of kids now are just satisfied with Fortnite and don't want to go anywhere else? Or maybe they don't have that much free time to play games. Maybe it's just because it's the summer. It could also be because of the pandemic and remote learning that they just don't have time or internet bandwidth to be playing video games.
So, you saw through me.
But yeah, I have not seen anything even try in the past couple of months to do what we have seen other Fortnite clone type games try and do.
Let's talk about this, shall we?
Gametsu has Tribes of Midgard Season 1, the Wolf Saga trailer. Which,
Easy as pie.
Got him in my sights.
let me watch this so I can remind myself what Tribes of Midgard is. Looks like it's kind of a Viking themed hack and slash group game. Maybe kind of a Diablo-esque game. This, if anything, is a little too high action to be called a Diablo-esque game. Yep. Okay. Still interested in that game, although very, very little interest.
I go with the wind.
Play that, I guess. Gametsu says Hunter's Arena Legends launches August 13th. It's currently in early access on PC. What's funny here is I don't recognize this game at all. Let's see what this is. Mantisco, never heard of that company. It looks pretty. Looks like it's got some like Chinese fighters. And so
I'll
it
eat their troops for
looks like it's a fighting game that doesn't look bad. But now they're like flying. So why would they have flying mechanics? Is this a fighting game or is this some kind of RPG game? With a name like Hunter's Arena, it would sound like it's a fighting game, but some of this footage definitely makes it seem more like a player versus player game. Let's check this out on, yeah, PvP and PvE elements. Yeah, I think that pretty much kills it for me as a concept, because I just don't think there's, we've seen far too many of those style games, and then they just aren't good.
Cry for me. Scream for me.
Okay.
Scatter like the blossom.
Where should I drop this lightning bolt? Oops, my hand slipped.
Well, aren't you something?
Yeah, we can see here on Steam that this is mixed reviews, 58% in early access, so it's not been well received. And it supports English, Korean, German, well, Chinese language, Japanese language, Russian language, Korean language, and English language. No in-app purchases and only $10. I'll grant it that, but yeah, we've just seen far too many of these games where it's just about beating up people, and 30-player PvP versus PvE events is highly unlikely to really succeed. Much like my experience right now with Shadowverse. Just working my way down the rank. The game Sifu has been delayed to early 2020. It has a Fight Club gameplay teaser trailer if you're interested in looking at that. The game Jet the Far Shore has a gameplay trailer and screenshots. Let's check that out. What is Jet? Seems like you're flying a jet over an alien landscape. And that seems to be pretty much all you're doing. Shooting some other people. The people do not look like they're particularly well animated or high polygon. Yeah. I don't get the feeling that this is going to be a particularly pretty game, and very often if a game is not pretty, it is not interesting to me. And so with that trailer, I am not hyped. We may have already talked about this, but a Deathloop 9-minute gameplay walkthrough was released. I don't know if there's really anything more you need to see as far as a gameplay walkthrough. You kind of know what the game is. You're going to enter encounters where you have to shoot people, and then when you die you are respawned like so many other games, and yet the Deathloop concept plays a major factor. This feels like a more high action version of something like Dishonored, where hopefully the game does not particularly punish you for creating chaos and killing a bunch of people, but instead rewards you a lot more. There kind of was a problem with the idea of going high action in the Dishonored 1, at least, in that you could do it, but then you would get the bad ending, or the high chaos ending. Whereas it would be nicer to not have branching paths and just let the player play the game the way they want to play it. And then there is also, I suppose, an argument around whether a Thief game or a Dishonored game works better in this kind of sci-fi universe type environment. Some kind of hacking to then blow up a barrel. There's also that game Six Shards of Darkness that was also too much stealth. The game Fist Forge and Shadow Torch is for PS5, PS4, launches on September 7th. Which, okay, we'll see. Wait for reviews on that. Already talked about that. Demon Slayer has more information for the Demon Slayer game, showing off another character. And I think at this point, since I don't see the beginning of the end, we're going to have to burn through some of the actual games that came out on Steam today, but that's fine. Here we have a game called Night the Silent Killer, which seems a little empty. Yeah, I don't think that there's really a game here more than this is just an asset flip experience. Yeah, I don't think there's a game here. 319 English and Chinese. Here we have a game called Legend of Homebody, which is a life sim survival management game, which might hit a little too close for home for a lot of people and a lot of gamers in particular. $4.49, no in-app purchases, English and Chinese. I'll put it on the follow list, and I'll have to think about it, certainly, if that is something that I'd want to play. Here we have a game on Steam called Sisters of Silent Liberty, which is obviously just a horror asset flip dark screenshot game. Yeah. They've got like an anime made character here with a grotesque mask over her face. $4.99 English only. You can barely make it out. Here we have a game called Star Apprentice Magical Murder Mystery, which looks like a visual novel. I'm not 100% sold on it, but I like the name. It's free, English only, so it's probably fairly short. I'll put it on the follow list. See if people review it as a free game. It does seem to be a game we have to actually walk around to, which is actually kind of rare for a visual novel game.
Scatter like the blossom.
Let's see, we may have already talked about this game. Fill and Cross Pirate Riddles. Just a pictogram game, $2.99, nothing of interest there. And we have a game called Levi Chronicles, which might be something, but it might also just be kind of an asset flip game. $5.99, English full audio. Think we'll put it on the follow list. Yeah, it looks like there might be a puzzle adventure game here, and that they're just doing a kind of bad job of highlighting it. There may not be a lot of game there, and that might be part of the reason. That worked terribly.
I do not fear death.
A fitting end.
Best of luck to you.
Well, that worked a little bit better than I thought it would. Here we have a game on Steam called The Last Defense, which is a tower defense game. And that's pretty much all you need to say to eliminate it. $9.93, English only. Pretty expensive.
For the end is near.
Here we have a game called The Absolute Hilarious Cat Game, which looks like an asset flip garbage game. $2.54, English only. Here we have Escape the Speedrun Game, which is probably not that good. Seems like it really is just an asset flip game. Also, yeah, I don't really feel like there's a thing here worth playing. $1.19, English only. I'm gonna skip that. We'll see if we can
keep running from my sins.
do this.
A flash of metal, a silent night.
The ruin of 6 heralds' destruction.
Can attack 2 times per turn.
A fitting end.
Sink. Best of luck to you.
Interesting. So I could have attacked the face instead. Here we have a game called Plokoth, which looks like a 2D platformer game. It's free, English only. I'll put that on the follow list. It's already rated fairly positively. Here we have a game called Logic Car, which seems like you're programming a car to cross a bridge. Although, I don't know why the program of a car to get over a jump or gap really makes sense. Seems like what you've done is taking the concept of a programming game, something like Game Builder Garage, and put it in combination to bridge making games and come out with something that doesn't logically make sense for either.
Time to do much party. Not enough business.
Cry for me. Scream for me.
No more!
Your head and body must part ways.
Where should I
Unless
drop this lightning
I've
bolt?
just eliminated all his options, I don't think I'm gonna win here. Here we have a game called Entity Researchers, which visually doesn't look like anything of interest. Calling it a JRPG, early access, $11.89, English only.
Day, my friend.
Here we have a game called Lona Realm of Colors, which is a point-and-click puzzle platformer according to the tags. But according to the visuals, I could not tell you what kind of game it is at all. Seems almost like you're just interacting with images and clicking on them, which that might very well be what it is. There were some early like Apple II games that certainly worked that way, where you just click on something and it would change from one image to another. $11.04, English only. Not having a character you control move, though it will be fairly off-putting. I don't see any way around that. Draw a card.
This all belongs to me. My wings and heart
That.
cry for blood.
And that.
Desire transformation is sin.
Oops, my
do
hand
that.
slipped.
Here we have a game called Ravensward the Undaunted,
This cruelty ends.
which looks like it's maybe a slightly better polished dungeon crawler fantasy game. I don't know if I ever want to play a game like this, though. That was one of the things about Hellblade, is that there was this section where you're just wandering around with you're just wandering around with these
What'll pop first?
torches,
My face
and
or your face?
it seems
Don't be shy.
right, well,
Why am I
do
so
I have enough to win here?
Oops, my hand
Don't be
slipped.
shy. Thanks for the soul.
Your strength is formidable.
Finally. Hopefully this was the right one I was supposed to be playing. These treasure chests can be anything as little as 10 rupees, maybe 30 is the minimum, or as big as an emblem or a card.
The afterlife.
Yeah, that was one Bloodcraft victory. We need theoretically 3 more, but if I could get just one more ranked victory at all, I would be happy. And we'll ride the victory. Yeah, I don't know if you can really make something that interests me as far as a fantasy dungeon crawler like Skyrim without putting a lot of it outside of the dungeons.
Pointed sword deserves
Here we have a
pointed
game called
response.
Arcade Redemption, which looks like a collection
Enhance.
of a lot of
Fire.
the old arcade style games that a lot of these don't even really exist anymore in a lot of arcades. I'm always looking for one of these. These often are VR only. Doesn't seem like this one supports VR at all, though. English full audio, $15.29. Kind of a premium there, but what can you say? Noticeably, they've come in here and tried to make everything a parody of what they would normally be. So nobody can come back and sue them, although I don't know if anybody really would sue them for making VR versions. This might be a case where there's really only 5 games in your mind. You would expect a lot more, but it's questionable how many of the arcade games really need to exist in a game and how many really do. Here we have a game on Steam called Blood Type, which looks like an asset flip shooter. Although I will say these monsters that kind of look like the characters from Stranger Things look interesting, different to say the least. I think there's also some monsters that kind of look like that, where this is a typing game, I just realized. Which, yeah, I don't think horror typing games, as much as the gimmick of Typing of the Dead was funny, I don't think it really is a good way to make a typing game. There's just too many kids that don't want to play horror games while having them type. I would much prefer some very positive, well, frankly, I think I'd prefer a positive anime teacher like character going, "Good job, keep it up, good work," that just non-stop positive reinforcement
Belongs to me.
while teaching kids to type. Maybe it doesn't have to be an anime teacher, maybe it's just a teacher in general, or a character in general, and it could be Mario just as well. Mario shouting out positive phrases.
Form detected.
Honestly, there is a lack of Peach and Daisy games anyway, so it would be easy enough to get either Pauline or Peach or Daisy or what's the other one? Princess in the Mario universe, yeah, the Mario Galaxy universe princess. I forget what her name is. But yeah, any one of those characters could easily be put into a Mario typing game, and they could be the face of educational games. Certainly. It'd be easy also, frankly, to have a Mario Princess Peach teaches typing and word things. Mario Daisy or Princess Daisy teaches all the math things. And frankly, you could bring in, I think her name is Chrisella from the Galaxy universe, to do like the art games. And just establish each of them as being very smart and helpful in non-violent ways, compared to Mario games, which are always kind of more action oriented.
What you need is a nice roaring flame.
Don't be shy.
Moving on, we have a game called More the Eternal Utopia, which seems to be some kind of choose your own adventure, weird looking visual novel for 99 cents, English and Spanish. I can easily skip that. Here we have a game called Slime Story, which looks like nothing. It is 99 cents, bunch of languages. Here we have a game called Genetic Fluff, which looks like nothing, for $5.84, English only. Here we have a game called Firefighter. I'm always looking for a firefighting game. It definitely looks like this is just a mobile port with the buttons here, but there might be a chance here. The problem, I think, is this $6.74 is going to be a high ask for a game that does not look that good. But I'll put it on the follow list. Wouldn't be surprised if it never gets any reviews. Here we have something called Project Lounge, which looks to be more of an open sandbox development tool than an actual game, and it doesn't even look like it's very useful or good visual quality. $5.39, English only. That's actually way too expensive, way too cheap for a programming language or sandbox game. And then there's all kinds of items and in-app purchases, it seems like it's selling. So we hit that.
I'm already a proper lady, you know.
Scatter like the blossoms.
I've got all the magic. Is that how you treat a lady?
String is so pricey.
Here we have a game called Red Embrace Mezzanine, which is a point-and-click adventure game. It looks like, really looks more like a visual novel. This probably has to do with vampires. Free. They're saying it's similar to Hellblade, which arguably, now having played Hellblade, saying Hellblade is close to a visual novel is not insane.
by size and strength.
There is no visual novel elements to it, really. It's all voice acted, but it really is just telling you a story. Let's see. Next we have a game called Tower Arena, which looks like it's a card collectible game. Maybe it's a deck builder game. Free to play. Single player. Seemingly new modes are coming out. That's what they claim. Yeah, I don't know if this really is a collectible card game. This might very well be more of a, you just use these cards to play a board game. Which, it's often easy to confuse the two.
You okay?
Each life has a different value.
Let's see, here we have a game on Steam called Black Skylands. And it has an interesting visual trailer. Looks like it's a top-down airship shooter. Not sure if I'm particularly interested in airships, but they definitely seem like they put some polish on this. It's already positive, it's early access, it's $17.99, which is fairly expensive. Supports a bunch of languages, allegedly full audio in all of them.
Now the fight begins.
On to the next life.
Oh, my beloved Nava.
I guess I have to put this on the fall list, but this isn't really striking me as my style. I feel like a lot of airship games just end up being kind of the same excuse as pirate ships on the ocean. It's a great way to have emptiness on the screen.
Cry for me. Scream for me.
No, I don't think I want to do that. Here we have a game on Steam called Panic Mode, which doesn't look like anything really. Early access, $5.09. Here we have a game called Twig Flipper, which looks like it's a probably Gorilla's game where you're flipping twigs at each other. Nope, it's a 2D platformer with the ability to run or fly. Still doesn't look good. $1.19, English only. Let's hit this. And here we have a game called Neo Commanders, which doesn't look like anything of interest. Like it's some kind of 2D RPG is what it says it is. $3.24, English only.
All of you.
Here we have a game called Spiral to Despair, which I don't really like this art style, but I would almost give it a chance if this was a more interesting looking game, because it feels like this is an artist really trying to be good at art. That was one thing I was thinking about is how little actual education I got in the art class I took when I was in school. Just in the fact that they did not really tell me to do how to do anything. Like not one bit. It was just draw this, go. Like as if from day one. You're supposed to know how to draw, the proper techniques of drawing, shading, shadowing, outlines. There was just none of that. It was public school education really at its worst, in the sense that it was just telling you to accomplish something without telling you how.
Today is your lucky day, my friend. A flash of metal, a silent night. There's a wave coming. Hold on to your time to splash out.
I probably would have been a lot more interested in the art class had it been more of a specialized art class, where instead of like, for this 3 weeks we're gonna draw, in this 3 weeks we're gonna paint, in this 3 weeks we're gonna do pottery, like very different styles and mediums and forms.
The world cycles on.
That was one of the classes that ridiculously was required to write essays too. It's just like, why am I writing essays in an art class? Sure, writing is an art. I'll buy that, but also I've been was at the exact same time required to write write essays in every other class, basically too, including English, where it would have made a lot more sense in an English class to have assignments to write, do fictional writing. But yeah, suffice it to say, I don't feel like I learned much in that class. Next we have a game called Brick Breaker Heart Collector, which just looks like an Arkanoid clone. $3.99. Here we have a game on Steam called Infinite Valley, which is an infinite runner. I can see the beginning of the end, so I'm going to just start one more game and hope for a quick disconnect while we wrap up. Here we have a game called To Be With You, which is some kind of visual novel. Seems kind of rough in the visuals. $2.99 English only. I'll give it a follow. Give it a chance. Here we have a game called Tabari 2 Nightmare.
I guess you're looking for a fight.
Seems like it's a precision platforming game. I don't think this is the kind of game I'd want to play. Yeah. This definitely feels like it's just far too much of a precision platformer for my taste. The $6.29 English and Japanese. What I'd really want to see is Tabari 1. Tabari and Nightmare of the Cursed Moon. Night of the Curious Moon, I guess, is the original game. And this came out in 2012, so they aren't really rushing by any means. Mostly positive with 65 reviews, but certainly that really shows the relevancy issue too, when you have a 9-year-old game and 65 people have bothered to review it. Let's see. There's this game on Xbox called Baiku Hundreds of Melodies. It's now available for Xbox One and Series X and S. Never heard of it. Which probably means it's nothing of a game, but it caught my interest visually. No obvious reasons. Hey. Gametsu says Resident Evil Village shipments and digital sales have topped 4.5 million. So, yeah. Resident Evil Village doing well. No big surprise there. Head Up Games on Twitter just got verified. Like, which seems kind of ridiculous. I saw a video where you can self-sign or your email signatures and get a verification mark on a lot of email browsers. It's probably not really worth doing since people don't really expect to see verification marks on emails anyways, so it's kind of just a unnecessary addition. I feel like today's been a pretty bad day as far as me saying and ah. Alright, with that, I'm going to go through my Twitter feed and see if there's any more news. We've got a good collection of games that we have left over from Monday. Here I see one with an anime girl with big boobs, so the adult games still seem to come. There was a like Kickstarter adult game where PayPal once again did shenanigans, which seem like they should be illegal, where they have locked down the funds. PayPal notorious for basically locking down funds and stealing money from people. People making adult games or people in general. Sometimes the reasoning seems to be incredibly arbitrary and pointless. And yeah, PayPal, I can tell from my own experience, is not very helpful on either ends.
I serve in hopes of a better tomorrow.
They're not helpful for the consumers, they're not helpful for the sellers.
Unbelievable!
Man, why does this keep doing this?
Nothing stops me once I got my speedy boots on.
Right. Twitter homepage. Click on that one. Was I done looking at Gametsu?
Some things are
Or
worth
Gamer
living
Sutra?
for.
You're done for.
I guess I am.
We'll change things for the better, you hear?
Do this.
Spell looks so sweet, you'll get cavities.
Do this. And the turn. No, it doesn't look like we have any new news. I will say I've been killing it on Destiny Child, the adult gacha game I'm still playing. It seems like everybody's killing it. We are doing really, really good on the world boss.
It won't be long now.
Which is nice. And
I always catch the
I'm getting into late stages with that game where I'm getting closer and closer to having everything kind of just maxed up. Every character to the very max, and at that point there's a whole other system that I would have to start focusing on. But that whole other system I think benefits in other ways.
Unbelievable!
Okay. Play 5, or I can do this. And I can evolve this.
The ordained hour has arrived.
Do that.
Mean son of a gun, ain't you?
And lose regardless.
The path ends here.
Well, it's like 1 in the morning, so it's not super surprising that we didn't have any chats, and now is as good a time as any to end this stream. I also found, I'll just quickly mention, I had this program and I forgot I had it installed, APK Mover or something like that. App. No, it's like App Mover or something that will automatically move a lot of apps to the SD card on Android if you have an SD card slot, which is a big if these days, and clear the cache automatically of every app you select, and can save you a lot of time if you're just trying to make some free space. And yeah, my tablet like only has like 16 gigs internally in space, but honestly too, for a lot of people, 16 gigs, 32 gigs, that's probably all you need. And if you're getting a new phone that has like 128 gigs or 256 internally and doesn't have an SD card, the only real risk there is that it would just be a nightmare to recover that. If it broke, it'd probably be impossible to recover it if it broke, and it would be a nightmare to move all that data over, but it still probably is a nightmare to move all that data over. We need something like better than micro SD that's faster and more expandable, something that could even be used as RAM in phones. I would trade a micro SD slot any day of the week for a RAM chip that you could expand the RAM in your phone and make it run twice as fast, particularly if that, even if those RAM chips burnt out after a couple of years and it told you had to put in a new RAM chip. So yeah, new interface device would be appreciated, although we're not too far away from merging the idea of storage and RAM in one. Anyways, I don't want to get into a rant about technology lust or techno lust. That's going to be it for this stream. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. If you want a friend to follow me on any social media sites, there's a whole bunch of links down below. And if you want to support me further, there's a link to Patreon, or you can friend me on Steam and get me a game off my wishlist.